we're sitting here talking about the idea of feeling safe, and that's relevant and valuable, obviously, in relationship. And if we really are sovereign beings, like I don't have to be treated that way. Like I have every right, married, not married. I don't care what, legal binding document you got. It doesn't guarantee you that somebody is beholden to the way that you treat them, right?
Wow, I am so pumped to have both John Kim and Vanessa Bennett on the podcast. Writers, TikTok celebrities, podcast aficionados, therapists, coaches. I mean, you guys have every title available, I think.
Parents.
Parent, yeah, that was significant. Couple.
Mm-hmm. Not married. Interracial, which is actually now the norm.
Yeah, which is the new not interracial.
Yeah, man, I grew up in the 80s where if you saw an Asian man and a white woman, it was like, whoa, it was so weird to me. And this is why I gravitated toward Bruce Lee. I feel like he was the first one to really kind of do that. There were a lot of Asian women with white men because
there's a lot of fetishizing of that.
Yeah, like the whole Asian women being the submissive, and also with military stuff. But you rarely saw an Asian man with a Caucasian woman. And I think because in the 80s, Asian men were like, long dug dong and nerds, and they weren't attractive. And so to see an Asian
that
guy,
actually hurts my heart to hear you say that.
I know, right?
Yeah,
right? Like I feel my heart actually ache. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my best friends is, I have so many Asian friends. I don't know, maybe just where I grew up, but one of my best friends is Chinese, and he was talking to me about how if you look at the history of Hollywood, like other than Bruce Lee and his son, who both passed, is like there were really till Crazy Rich Asians, there were no leading Asian men who were romantic interests, which really does shape culture, which when he pointed it out, I was like, wow. And I remember seeing, I think it's a Korean rapper, I think he was Korean, where he took his face and put him on all the leading men in his rap song of all these, like the Titanic, and just singing about that. And I just thought, wow, it's crazy how much it shapes what people look for. And I think Match.com's data also shows that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the least clicked on profiles are Asian men still. Yeah.
Thank God I'm not single, Mark.
Good thing you are now a Asian sex icon. Look at that hair. I mean, how could you not be?
Hey, can I brag about myself real quick? Before we came on, so I have a hole in my mouth from getting a tooth pulled, and so it's very susceptible of infection. And yet I put Listerine into my mouth so I smell fresh for my partner.
See, that is so nice.
That is love.
That is very thoughtful. Yeah. You burnt a hole in your mouth for your partner.
You potentially hurt yourself just to make sure you smelled nice for you.
Well, that's it. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. That's all we wanted to. That's the lesson right there. Burn your mouth.
I love it.
All right. Burn your mouth. Yeah.
It's a good thing that you wrote the book. It's not me, it's you. It's perfect. It's perfect. Perfectly titled. And I love the title of it. All the books that you have written, and now that you've written together, are well titled. And I think of I used to have another account, a private account on Instagram, and essentially the name of it played on "It's not me, it's you."
Oh, interesting.
But really, it's so I'm curious. This book you've written together. Mm-hmm. So, journey of relationship, two relationship experts writing about relationship. Is it also memoir-ish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's part memoir, part self-betterment, I guess you would call it. But I think we did that purposely because, there's this like misconception that therapists have their shit together. Yeah. And it's just not true, right? Like we're humans and flawed just like everybody else. And so part of the memoir aspect was important to us because we wanted to show people that all of these things that we talk about in the book are things that we struggle with in our relationship, right? So it felt really seamless to say, here's, I don't know how many chapters there are, but let's say 10 topics that we see our couples that we work with as therapists struggle with the most, and also happen to be the things that we struggle with the most too. There's a reason for that, right? We should talk about it and go deeper. So I also think it helps just humanize us.
Yeah, I think when people have put other people on pedestals, to hear their human relatable experiences. I think that's what's really changed in sort of the therapeutic coaching world, especially the therapeutic world, at least in my experience. Is I remember running a retreat with a therapist, and I was self-disclosing, and she often would not self-disclose because it was against her what she had been trained. But then I remember seeing what is his name? He's like the godfather of group therapy. He wrote Love's Executioner. Yeah, I heard him speak at a therapist conference, and he was saying, maybe one of the greatest disservices we've done in our profession is not broader shown that we are on the same level, essentially.
I love
And so
Yalom. He's
oh my
brilliant.
God, it was
He's
like
also,
listening to
and I
sage.
mean, this is the whole tangent, but one of the things he said, I saw him at the psychology conference a few years back. And one of the things he said, somebody asked him, what was your top advice for a therapist, right? Because it was like a stadium of 8,000 of us. And the number one thing he said is, keep your ass in therapy. And I clapped. I stood up and I was like, oh, it's like all therapists should be in their own therapy. And I'm like such a proponent of that. But I love to hear him say that so just matter of fact to a room of therapists. Anyway.
I haven't been in therapy for years.
That's not true. Last year you were.
About a year and a half. Do as I say, not as I do, Mark.
I remember the first time I started going to therapy, and the therapist saying, a lot of the roots of your behavior are from your childhood. How was your childhood? And I was like, I had a great childhood. And you
It's
could
usually
see
the indicator.
her,
We're like, oh, really?
I could see her go, like, okay. And it's not that I didn't have a great childhood, but a lot of the way that I saw my childhood didn't allow me to see the actual experiences. I was so busy wanting my parents to appear as being great parents that I didn't allow them to also be human, which allowed me to experience where I didn't get my needs met, or I was the youngest, and how did that impact me? And, how did, their relational structure, how they dialogue impact me? And I think a lot of that journey into therapy is you don't realize the richness you get from it, or the coaching, or whatever you might identify with, in order to just do some self-inquiry. And I'm curious, in writing the book, which I'm guessing also translate into the experience of the book, what did you guys learn more about each other? And then how did that translate into what you were writing? I'm curious.
Yeah, so for me, it was terrifying. At first, I thought it was a good idea because I've always wanted to write a relationship book. And I thought, oh, this is an opportunity for me to collaborate with my own partner. And so I didn't think about that she would check me as well, right? So I'm no longer the expert. We're both experts, quote unquote. So we're also both can be patients in a way too. So we're kind of checking each other. And when you're writing something, you're replaying things. So a lot of things are stirred. A lot of things come back up. We didn't have a smooth start in the beginning. It was actually rocky.
In your relationship, you mean?
Yeah. I was ambivalent because I was trying to be single on purpose, and I was sold the idea of the one, and I thought, okay, I met you I was like 45-ish.
Yeah, you were just about to turn 46.
Yeah, and I thought, I'm swimming toward 50. The next one's going to be the one. And so when I met Vanessa, I didn't want a relationship. I wanted debauchery. I wanted to do everything that I didn't do in the 20s because I was in a relationship. Like have one night stands and wake up with people that I didn't like, and do drugs and have like that was my whole thing. And I didn't get far.
Sorry, I ruined that for you,
Mark. I didn't get far. I think maybe like a half experience. It was very innocent, and then I met Vanessa. And so the result of that was a lot of ambivalence, a lot of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so she had no tolerance for that.
Yeah. And I think as far as the writing goes, I remember John saying to me after reading a part that I had written, so we were using Google Docs and we would just kind of both add to it, whenever we had time. And I remember him saying to me, reading one part about this beginning that was so hard, and him being like, oh, that's really hard to read. Like there was a part of it that I don't think that maybe we'd never talked about. I talked about this part where we were in Costa Rica and we'd had a big fight. And I basically in my head was like, okay, after this trip, this is it. I'm not doing this with him anymore. And I'm like laying in the jungle in a canopy, like overlooking, and I'm WhatsApping with my friends back in the States. And we're all like, fuck him. He's an asshole. Fuck him. He's like, it's all show. Like he doesn't actually have any self-awareness. I mean, we were just like ripping him apart. Right. And so I actually talked about this in the book, and he was like, I'm sorry, what? Like he had no idea.
Like, where's this WhatsApp group?
And he also knew the two people, and he didn't know that they were talking
That's
shit.
fucked
So
up. Yeah.
it was interesting writing, an interesting experience.
I mean, that would be hard to hear, of course, because you have this awareness of, and I think, where feedback has been delivered from my partner too, meeting someone who can meet us.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? Which is really how a relationship is always supposed to be. But actually, I spent so much of my life running from people who could meet me because I knew that if I did, I would be called out. I would be called for it. I'd be vulnerable.
That's what you said in the book. That was like one of the things you actually said was like, oh shit, I've met my match, basically.
Yeah, but she's the avoidant. Are you an anxiously attached, Mark, or
like, where do you
avoidant?
swing?
Yeah, or I mean, I'm sure you're more secure.
I'm more prone to anxiety with people who are avoidant. When I was in my running away from people who could call me forward, I was definitely avoidant. But as soon as I met someone who was a little more avoidant, like Kai was, I was more anxious. At least in my years when I met her, I was more prone to security. So I could feel my anxiety and sort of like stand my ground or allow space so she could come towards. Because I used to always take that space away. How has that shaped your guys' experience in a relationship?
Oh, a lot, man. So I'm anxious, right? I hold on to her leg. She's avoidant. She runs. I mean, there's a spectrum, right? So we're
when we're super activated.
Yeah,
obviously.
when we're activated, we've done a lot of work, of course.
Yeah.
We also have very different love languages. I'm words and
words make me very uncomfortable. I can write all day, but actually like looking you in the eye and telling you why I think you're amazing in the spot, I'm like,
And I need
You're
that.
like, can I just write you a note? I'll just pass it to you.
And you can just read it later on your own time.
We always say, if I wrote Vanessa's name in the sky, she would ask, like, how much did you pay for that?
So true.
And I'd be like, I wrote your name in the fucking sky. But I'm all about words and you're beautiful and blah blah whatever. And not getting that in return was really difficult until I realized she's more about acts of service. We have a story, and I'll let Vanessa tell it. But this was kind of the turning point. I found her earring, and this is it was a huge revelation for me as far as how we love each other.
Well, I think it goes even beyond how we love each other. I mean, look, relationships provide such an amazing mirror, right? Because you get this mirror back to yourself of yourself, and then you get to go, oh shit, there's so much more to work on there. There's so many more revelations I didn't even realize. So I was getting ready for clients. This is back when I was seeing like back to back, 8 hours of clients kind of thing. And I was rushing and I was late. And just as I was getting my earring, I dropped one of my nice earrings down the sink. And I remember being like, fuck, and like stomping up and down. John comes running up. Oh my God, something's wrong. And I'm like, just leave it there. I'll get it when I've got time in between sessions. I put a towel over the sink. Just don't touch it. And at some point I came back and he had gone to the hardware store. You understand. I mean, I had to, no,
I'm not that kind of
John
dude.
doesn't know how to swing a hammer. Like he's not that guy. So
I can do burpees for time. I can do burpees very fast.
But I'm usually the one hanging things, right? So he like went to the hardware store, got the specific kind of wrench, took out like the bottom of the sink, found the earring. And then not only did that, but he put it all together, cleaned it all up. And I was like shocked by this. And I went and told all of my friends.
But she didn't tell me.
But I never told him. I was like, this was amazing. It made me feel so amazing. And like, I don't know, a year later, I was retelling this and he was like, what? Like, you never told me.
I didn't get credit for something
about this story. And so it was just such an interesting experience for us to realize the difference in love languages. I also think for me, it was important to realize that words of affirmation don't have to be some looking you in the eye in that moment and saying, I find you so amazing. It was more like, hey, I really appreciate the way that you did X, Y, and Z. It made me feel X, Y, and Z. And that could be words of affirmation. I was complicating it more than it needed to be. So that was a pretty big learning.
So in the beginning, because of that not, us having different love languages and different attachment styles, I felt kind of undesired. What did you feel?
In the well, it's funny. I think we both felt undesired in the beginning because there was ambivalence from you. And so I kind of got to the point where I essentially said like, shit, or I get off the pot. Like, I'm into this. If you're not into this, that's cool. But like, tell me, because I don't want to spend any more time, doing this with you. But I think once we were in it, I think your ambivalence made me feel pretty unsafe because I felt like I just couldn't trust that you were really in it. And then the anxiety for you tends to make me feel a little suffocated. So
Yeah.
and I'm sure you can understand this, as a lot of people listening, I'm sure can, when you've got that anxious avoidant dance. And we're 5 years in and we still kind of struggle with that sometimes. The anxiety kicks up. I feel, unlovable or unloved or undesired. And then I'm like, stop asking me for it. And it just turns into this dynamic,
Yeah. Like, I'm
So
not giving you your words right now, Historically, throughout the day, you'd see me drinking a flavored sparkling water, and if I went to a social event, whether people are drinking or not, I'd go to the standard sober person's drink, flavored or regular sparkling water. And I thought to myself, like, can I find a drink that not only tastes good, but perhaps improves my mood, increases my attentiveness, my awareness? And I'm in love with this product from Cured Nutrition called Euphoria. It's a natural caffeine replacement. It's great for energizing your mind, your mood, your body, and in it are the highest quality adaptogens and nootropics. So some of the ingredients, just to give you a heads up, are lion's mane, which is a medicinal mushroom. There's also premium CBD in it, and that way you get that balanced energy. You don't get that tired and wired feeling. There's L-theanine, which is an amino acid that gives you energy and relaxation. There's 5-HTP to support your serotonin levels, and there's also vitamins A, B, and C. This drink tastes freaking amazing. There's a spicy mango flavor, that's actually my favorite. There's also a crisp apple, that's delicious too. But I invite you to check it out if you're looking for something to get you through the parties, also the afternoons instead of your coffee, and it'll help improve your focus, your productivity, your mood, your cognitive performance. Then definitely try this drink out. Go to Cured Nutrition, which is CURED nutrition.com/create the love, and Cured is extending an offer to you, my listeners, of 20% off. So just use the code create the love at checkout. So once again, that's curednutrition.com/create the love, and the coupon code create the love at checkout will save you 20% on any and all of Cured Nutrition's products. I notice before I even notice that my nervous system can sense when Kai's gone into like more avoidance, or like it's just a switch. And then all of a sudden I want to go into like repair or like overreach, or my natural thing is to think I did something wrong and I need to fix this. And then I resent that I think I did something wrong, even though no one's actually said anything yet. I've created this all in my own head.
But I wonder too, when you say that,
well done.
it makes me realize, and I know you know this, but like the average person out there, I think social media is wonderful, but also the downfall of social media with mental health is that we make things a little too simple sometimes. These like little posts with check marks and like you're codependent if, and it's just like 1, 2, 3. Attachment
ways to
style.
not be anxious.
Exactly. It's like
or
they're not that simple,
attachment.
right? Because I definitely fall on more of the avoidance scale, but what you're talking about is totally me. I sense it within him immediately, probably before he even notices it. I sense it. And then I'm the, what's wrong? What did I do? And then in my head, I'm like, oh, here we go again. And then I go into my avoidant, like, screw this. Why do I bother? So I don't know. It's like, where does it land on the attachment spectrum versus where does it land in the codependency spectrum versus where does it land, so
your
there's
nervous system. And
totally.
Yeah, as you say that, I'm laughing thinking Kai's probably thinking about my trigger and I'm only picking up on the fact it's like she's an algorithm above me, I'm like, she's picked up that I'm anxious and I think that I'm picking up that she's avoidant, but it's only because she picked up.
Because you're anxious.
Yeah, that's actually really funny to think, and it's probably true because I kind of feel like the female sense just tends to, it's like a radar that's, sometimes I think she's in the 7th dimension and I'm just operating in the 3rd. Like, hey, can we talk about things? And she's like, I already did with your soul. Everything's good.
We're already We've worked through it already.
Yeah, it's all good. Do you feel more relaxed? I did that.
Oh, I do. That's weird. I do feel more relaxed. Great.
Yeah, exactly. So that idea, of rocky, or I guess more challenging at the start, did that challenge both of your own narratives about relationship? Or it did? Because I know you've spoken about that before, John, about swimming past the breakers.
Yes.
Is that an awareness that you had through that?
So the breakers, and there are still waves, right? So the breakers in this relationship, the differences as far as attachment styles, love languages, are differences in sexual desire and what sex looks like. We have a funny story where when I was first dating Vanessa, because I'm a little bit kinky, Mark, and I
I know
said,
exactly what you're gonna say.
not crazy kinky. I don't like to be like, we don't have a sex dungeon.
Hey,
Or
listen,
anything.
I like a good kink. You're
I
not
like it.
No
gonna.
She
judgment.
doesn't. I do. And I
No
said,
judgment.
it was fresh. We're dating. I said, hey, can I slap you? And she said, if you slap me, I'm going to slap you back. And I was like,
I was
oh,
very serious.
that's
By the
not
You're
way,
going
like,
to work.
this is cool. This
people
is an
need to
extra
understand
kink.
too, like I'm a New Yorker, and so there's a little bit of that edge. Like
Jesus.
we say slipping past the breakers and the differences, but I would jokingly say that one of our biggest differences in the beginning was culturally being from LA and being from New York. That was a huge difference for us. But yes,
I mean,
you
there's
did.
memes created just about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Biggie
it's so
Tupac.
true.
Yeah.
Like he was serious when he said, "Hey, can I slap you in a sexual way?" And I was dead ass when I was like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna slap you back." And he was so like, "Oh, that is not what I meant," and
Well,
that doesn't do
yeah,
it
it
for
doesn't
me.
work. That doesn't work. Someone has to. We can't both be dominant.
Well, we can because I am.
It's like just an endless slapping.
Yeah, that's not hot. But anyway, I'm saying sharing that story because as a kind of an example of again differences, and so because of these differences, I had to swim past what was coming up for me, create new definitions, and then start to see beauty in the contrast. So the differences at first, I kind of highlighted and used them as a way to drift or say maybe this isn't for me in the beginning, right? And then after, I started to see the differences and then tried to see the beauty in the differences. So, for example, the slap, instead of saying like, "Oh, we're not the same in the bedroom," I started to get curious about, what's her style, what turns her on, what would that dance look like, right? And across the board, and I think there's a tipping point where you not only accept someone but start to see beauty in the differences. That's where things start to tip. And I'm not saying that it's like a light switch and now it's done. It's a practice. It's a challenge, But it's a lot better today than it was in the beginning, where I was rejecting the differences, taking a black light to our differences instead of seeing our differences as a good thing.
Well, I actually will say too that I mean, because I had to do the same thing because clearly we're very different. When I start to notice myself getting into a place where I'm nitpicking the differences and I'm focusing on what bothers me about him because it's different than me, I'm at a place now where I'm able to be really aware of like, oh, I'm slipping into that. Something's going on, right? So I'm feeling disconnected from him. I'm resentful about something. There's some unmet needs happening. Something hasn't been spoken about. Because usually, I mean, to go back to more of the avoidant thing, that's kind of my way of putting up a wall, right? For most of us, that's our way of putting up a wall. This person's different than me. And so clearly they're not meant for me. And let me nitpick all the ways why we're different. And it helps us defend, right? So that's actually for me become a really good indication that there's something about myself that I need to pay attention to. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coming up.
Yeah, it's to see beauty in that contrast, as you said, that is such a different way of being,
Well,
in general,
I mean, just to do that in life,
right?
man,
Especially
with your friends, with
especially
anything.
right now.
Right now more than ever, right?
Right. Which imagine if someone said, I see beauty in that Biden voter or Trump voter,
Right.
it's not a fuck. If I see a meme that says that I would love that. If someone could make that who's listening to this podcast, that'd be great. It's such a different way of like, how do I learn from our differences? And it also removes the my way is right, your way is wrong, and that makes us incompatible, as opposed to the beauty that you're two sovereign, different human beings who really value your own independence and your purposes and your creation, which I know both of you, and I know you both are really purposeful and intentional in each of your individual work, and to have space for both of those things. What was the turning point where you might have both went from this isn't a match to, oh, I have met my match? Like, how did that, because you go from the group chat in Costa Rica and the difference in love languages not feeling valued to being like, oh, wait, there's actually value in what we're experiencing. And I would imagine that moment, because I definitely have experienced that moment where someone says, hey, like, you're either in this or you're not, and that's okay. There's some sort of safety that's created through that security in my experience, where I've been the person saying that, and I've also heard someone say that. And when I said it, I saw the other person sort of relax, like, Oh, like they are about honoring themselves, so I'm not responsible for their feelings. Oh, and you see avoidance sort of relax or anxiety sort of relax in that state. So I'm curious, where was that turning point where you're like, oh, you're dope?
We're still waiting for it, Mark. It's been 5 years. We're still waiting. I think it's around the corner, maybe a few
I
more
think
months.
we're just past the breaker.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. No, I think it comes in moments. So for
Yeah,
me,
I agree.
it's not really a turning point. It's like I'll see her maybe how she engages with our daughter, or maybe it's a back rub, or maybe it's a touch or a kiss or a glance. And it's like these little moments where I feel like, oh, this is why I'm with her, or
Mhm.
this is why I love her, or this is why I'm deciding to, invest in this relationship. So, yeah, it's not like this, oh, we turned the corner and now it's smooth
Yeah.
sailing. It's moments like that.
I think for me, it was in the safety. So I remember in the beginning, we got past that point of me saying like, "Are you in this or not?" And then I remember there was still a little ambivalence, like you saying to me, "How do you know?" And me saying, "I don't know. I don't. What does that mean? How do I know?" Right? I'm like, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm such a avid meditator and mindfulness practitioner that for me it was like, I don't know, but in this moment it feels good. In this moment
Right.
I'm enjoying your
Yeah.
presence. In this moment I want
Yeah.
to see you again, right? And so for me that was enough. And he really struggled with that because he was in his head so much and I was kind of trying to pull into my body. And so there was a little bit of kind of push pull, I think, in that. And I feel for me when I gave him, I mean, essentially an ultimatum, really, and he said, okay, no, I am in this. I want to build this with you. I do see the value in this. There was a sense of safety for me, not only in that moment, but I think perhaps because of my history and the kind of relationships I've been in, and I've been in relationships with people who struggle with substance abuse and just all kinds of different backgrounds. We won't even go into it. Um, every time him and I have conflict, and this probably is a little bit of a avoidance / codependent thing. Every time we have conflict and we come out the other side and I feel better about it, it reminds me like, oh, that's why I'm in this relationship. Because this idea
Yeah.
of meeting your match, for me, that's in conflict because I am crazy conflict avoidant, but also I just don't have good experience with conflict, which is why I'm avoidant of it. And so every time he sits across from me and like validates me, says to me, "Oh, I can see how you'd feel that way," whatever the kind of validating response is, there is a piece of my brain that goes, "Right. Click. Remember that.
Mm,
Remember that. Remember that." So
yeah.
it is in the moments, which is exactly what you said, but I think for me the moments tend to be those moments. Relational, I guess, moments, yeah.
It's not when you see me doing the dishes.
No.
It's after fights. It's after conflict.
Those moments too,
It
buddy.
can matter.
Dishes for sure. Never, as Kai would say, never stop doing dishes. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to, but I'm
We
gonna.
all want to.
I,
If we all stopped, who would do the
right.
dishes?
Yeah, like I remember that movie, The Breakup, which looked like a comedy, by the way,
Uh-huh.
in all its trailers, which was such a misleading
Totally.
load of shit.
Oh,
Totally.
right,
Because then
right.
you watch it and she's like, I want you to want to do the dishes. And he's like, why would I want to do the dishes? No one.
Quintessential quote from a
Yeah,
relationship movie.
yeah.
How do you handle conflict then? Because I mean, we're not taught it. I think generally we're not modeled it
Mm-mm.
by government, corporation, parents,
Yeah.
generally, right? Like obviously that's not true for everybody. We're not modeled it in school. I don't know, for me, it might be different now, but I don't think there's like an emotional intelligence relational class in 99.9% of schools,
Nope.
which I would argue is far more important than math. No offense to you math
1000%
majors.
Are you telling me you
But
don't
yeah,
use algebra or geometry every
on a
day?
day-to-day basis.
trigonometry, what about sine, cosine, tan? I don't even
Know what that is. I don't even
not
know
a
what
chance.
multiplication tables.
Typing
Let's not
class.
talk about this.
You don't use your woodshop skills? That's dating me.
Right?
That's dating
I
me.
would use those.
Actually,
But
woodshop.
yeah,
Yeah, I would
Actually, I
use
would use
those. Yeah,
those.
yeah.
yeah, you're in LA, so maybe not. But yeah, I'm curious, how do you navigate conflict, or what were some of the massive awarenesses you
Yeah.
had? Because you both also teach it, how to
Mhm.
model it, how to do it. You teach it in the book.
My go-to, my easy or short answer to this is reminding myself to try to understand before trying to be understood. And that comes from my story where most of my life I would go into conflict with my lawyer hat,
Mhm.
and I will argue shit. So one of my one of my aha moments was when I was married. We were in her car, and she had very like porcelain skin, and she said that from the sun driving, she would get all these sunspots. And I said, why don't you just tint the window? And she said, well, tinting the window isn't going to prevent the UV. And we argued for it in the car for an hour. And I had to prove to her that, and of course, it wasn't about the tinted windows, but we argued about it. I wouldn't let it go because I was saying that, no, the tint does help, my brother's in cars, whatever. And she said it wouldn't, until she started breaking down and crying. And I realized that it had nothing to do with the tinted windows. She just wanted to be heard.
You were
right?
like a dog with a bone.
Yeah, and I wouldn't let it go. And so if you don't create that safe space, and two people are holding on to their tug of war rope, the conflict, can be toxic. It can be proof that people don't feel safe, right? And so I think the first step is to create a safe space. First step is to be empathetic, to be neutral, not to go in defensive, holding up shields and wanting to win.
Which is obviously really hard. For
I still struggle with it.
Why is that so hard? Because I get it.
Ego,
it's
ego.
like Kai says something, and I'm just like, that must be really. It takes like I gotta dig deep.
Every ounce.
And it's not like a little surface deep. We're talking. I'm going into my soul, and my soul's like, this is the right thing to say, and I'm like, look.
It feels like a vasectomy.
That's a very.
I haven't had one of those, but now I know.
That only a very small population would know. I think that it's.
I got one recently,
I'm included. So
it's
Do you have one of those chairs with a hole in the bottom right now?
Donut. He's sitting in a donut. Actually,
no, I lost them at the hospital. Both testicles. They anyway.
Anyway,
yeah.
The tangents. Yeah, you're totally right, Mark. It's like people ask me all the time, again, this is this idea, this facade. We're on this pedestal. Like we somehow know how to do this better than other people. And it's like, no, let's be clear. I still want to yell at him and tell him he's an idiot. Sometimes it's just, it's upbringing, it's wiring. I will say it's ego. I mean, listen, ego is important. There's a lot of talk out there about killing. It is, but there's a lot of talk out there about killing the ego. And that's actually not the best way to do this. Ego is important. It helps us keep our sense of self. And it's also there to protect us. And so many of us grow up with this narrative of, if I do something bad, air quotes around bad, if I do something bad, I am bad. Right. Mm-hmm. We couple those together. And so, and I do, for sure I do. And that was actually an aha moment for me towards the beginning of our relationship, where John made this comment. I don't even remember what we were fighting about, but you said something like, this doesn't mean that you're, I don't know, like a bad partner or a bad person because I'm saying that, I need you to work on this thing. And it seems so simple, but hearing that, I was like, oh, wow, I actually don't think I ever realized until that moment how deeply those two beliefs were kind of intertwined, and they still are. And so I tend to go into John wants to talk about something, and I go into my like avoidant, dissociate, leave my body, shut down. And I feel it. I can feel myself getting hot. I get into my head, and that's where those thoughts come. Screw this. This is stupid. Why am I bothering this? And so part of my practice has actually been staying in my body, staying present in the fight, feeling the feelings of discomfort, maybe not speaking in that moment, just kind of biting my tongue and letting it happen. So it's different, I think, for both of us.
I just had a huge revelation / tip. So when Vanessa and I have, because she's so confident of avoidance, when we have a hard conversation, or if I have I want to talk about something that has hurt me or something serious, if I really observe her, she kind of turns into a 15-year-old teenager who's getting scolded
arms crossed
by her mom, and
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm looking away.
Weird.
I have a hard time making eye contact.
She just turns into a 15-year-old in her bedroom who was trying to climb out the window 2 days ago, right? And so when I noticed that, suddenly I now have so much empathy, because I don't see the 38-year-old, 37, 38.
I'm not even going to correct.
I don't see the 30. I don't see the adult Vanessa.
Always go with the lower. Exactly. I think it just round down. Always round down. 30. I think he said 30.
He said 30.
But I see the 15-year-old, and that makes me realize she has a story. That makes me see and feel where the defense is coming from, and then I instantly kind of neutralize
Depersonalize.
and depersonalize, and then I speak to it's so much easier to speak to the 15-year-old Vanessa who is defensive because of fear or her story than the 30-year-old Vanessa who has a sharp tongue and is a therapist.
Is a New Yorker.
A New York
And
therapist.
doesn't like slaps.
I was laughing earlier when you were saying like, I get more in my body and I pull John out of his head. I'm like, that's like the opposite of New York and LA. Like those are two switched roles.
Right.
It is.
That experience of moving into curiosity and vulnerability, how has that transcended in your relationship? Like, what do you experience now in your connection that perhaps you never experienced in previous ones that motivate you, I would imagine, because I'm sort of projecting and thinking about myself. Even that age thing you said, it made me think when I look at Kai and she goes into that avoidant space, how old she is and how much more compassion. I just felt myself go into my heart much more to think like, oh yeah, which is really that's a mindful experience to do in the conflict. It's easy for me to do right now because I'm podcasting about her. But yeah, that's a great reminder. But I'm curious, what has transcended in your relationship or you experienced that's new and worth it all?
Shit. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is somebody who's also committed to the growth, and that's not the same for everybody, but for me, that's really important. And I think I many years ago, probably around like 24, 25, when I started on this kind of inner journey, it became really apparent to me that I wanted somebody who I felt like was an equal in that. And I was with somebody who was not, and actually dug in their heels to the point of being like, I will not be that person. And as a matter of fact, like the one fight that I have in my mind always is him yelling at me, "We don't always have to be growing and evolving," and me being like, "Yes, we do." Otherwise, what's the point?
Actually, Tony Robbins says you're dying if you're not growing.
You're gonna be dead. Yeah, and so I don't have to worry about that with John because there's always room for more growth and more understanding and a deeper connection. And so that's it for me. I mean, obviously there's other things, but that's my number one, always has been.
Yeah, for me, it's looking past the hard shell. The example we use where, you slap me, I'm slapping you back. Like that hard shell, past that is feminine energy, is softness, is milk, is a blanket, it's a sage tree. So when I feel that, oh man, it's like I'm so thirsty for that it makes me vulnerable. It makes me connected. It makes me turned on, and it makes me very attracted to her. It makes me all of that stuff, right? So I'm able to see that more than in the beginning because it takes a time to see past people's layers.
Well, and also your ability to create the safe space for conflict and the safe space for me knowing that you're committed to the growth makes me feel safe enough to allow myself to drop into the more feminine space, right? Because if you don't feel safe, you don't go into feminine, you stay in masculine because masculine's very protective. And I think most likely, if I really have to look at myself with kind of go through a fine tooth comb with my relationships, I don't know that I ever really was able to drop much into
because you're in defense mode,
because
right?
I wasn't safe. So
one of my biggest complaints in our relationship was that you're not quote unquote lovey-dovey. Right. And it's funny because I have a master's, but I use words like lovey-dovey. And I think she was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "No, you're just
melt into me."
Yeah, I need you to melt into me. I need you to be more lovey-dovey, right? And it was because of the hard center, but it was also because of me and my ambivalence not creating a space for her to melt into me.
Right.
Can you cue the song "Melt Into You" by Modern English? That's probably the kind of expensive for this part.
Let's cue that in. It's interesting to think about requesting it and not providing the space for it.
Right. And it's hard. It's easy to request, right? It's very hard.
And it's how oppositional those energies are too. But I think we're not, we might be trained to ask for what we need, right? Like that could actually be a healthy, I'm asking for what I need. But if we're not energetically providing it, I think especially for the socialization that men have had to not like be in that vulnerable, open state, but that where we're embodying boundaries and purpose, but not from like and openness, but the openness not coming from a manipulative, nice guy trying to get
something.
Because like, man, women can smell that shit from miles away.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I also think that I wouldn't even say just men. I mean, haven't underneath patriarchal structures, haven't we all been taught that anything feminine is bad and wrong? So
Right.
even women
Right. The war on women.
and weak,
Right.
even women we were talking about me having a hard time softening. I mean, that's ingrained in all of us, right? Like there's something intrinsically wrong or bad if you're empathetic and vulnerable and connected and, all of these amazing, beautiful, necessary feminine qualities. We all, have been taught to shun them.
Once I got to the Tootsie Roll, Mark, the candy, you had to break.
How
There's
many
an old
licks does it
commercial
take?
of
How many licks does it take?
Yeah. That was the whole beginning of our relationship, and finally, I got to the soft center, and that really changed things for me.
I don't stay soft though. I mean, we go back and forth.
Well, because you're saying soft as in soft is a weakness, but I'm
Right.
not saying soft is a weak. I'm talking about
No, it's a good
transparency.
thing.
I'm talking about
Vulnerability
energy.
and yeah.
Openness and
Yeah.
surrendering into
Yes.
one another, but without the absence of other, which is an
Yeah.
interesting paradox to think about, that we are surrendering into one another, but we're also maintaining our sovereignty or identities. Or
Right. We're not losing ourselves.
Interdependence.
Okay, so what is the greatest challenge that you sort of wrote to in the book, like for couples? I'm curious, like which I would imagine then, or sorry, I wonder is what is the greatest challenge that you've seen in the work you've done with couples that you wanted to really solve, I guess, in this book?
I'm going to speak for myself. I don't know that this book, at least my personal intention wasn't to try to solve. Like I don't love calling myself an expert, even in anything, because like, who am I to say that I'm an expert, right? It was for me anyway. It was more about here is the landscape of the biggest issues we see in ourselves and in other couples. Here's a lot of what we've been able to discover by tapping into some of these more feminine qualities, right? And getting beneath the surface and being curious and being vulnerable and all of these. And so take these tools and use them if they work for you, right? Leave behind what doesn't. But I think that if we were to let's say again, 10 chapters or 10 topics in the book, if everyone was able to use those 10 topics, because you can't go super deep into 10 things in one book. So there's only so deep we could go, right? It's like if you're able to take this almost as a cliff notes, and I don't want to minimize our writing, but a cliff notes of here are the things to really watch out for. To me, it's like a spark. That's what I hope to give, is the spark of somebody to go, holy shit, I want to go deeper. I want to learn more about this. This resonates for me. How can I understand it more? So that's kind of how I personally see it.
Yeah, I think for me over the years, and by the way, I have no problem calling myself an expert. It's the only way to legitimize the $60,000 I spent on my education and the 6 years of grinding. Dude, we have to do
Let me validate
3,000
it,
hours.
okay? I will validate.
I worked for nonprofit for 5 years,
Yeah,
man.
it's true.
I'm an expert, Mark. No, I'm just kidding. I also don't like that word. For me, it's really this is simplified, but this is kind of what I found with working with couples. Most people are doing life at or around, not with. And so, and I say this all the time, but and I hate to sound like a broken record, but for me, I always ask myself, am I doing life with Vanessa, or am I doing life at Vanessa or around Vanessa? So around would be not talking about hard things, sweeping things under the rug, avoidant, right?
Type
Yeah,
vibes.
taking the long way home for the wrong reasons. And then at would be iron fist. This is how things should be done, my way or the highway, that kind of stuff. But with doing life with, now the shield is down. People are being vulnerable and open, and again, it's the Tootsie Roll, it's the soft center, it's that stuff. And I think whether we're talking about intimate relationships or with friendships or even with our family, doing life with people is really hard, right? But doing life with people, because it requires the vulnerability, the bridges instead of the moats that we dig around our castle. So like doing life with someone, constantly asking yourself that, and then asking yourself what that looks like, is, I think, what people are not doing.
That's a great analogy to think about how we orient to our partner. I not till I started to really consider it was I standing shoulder to shoulder or side by side. Yeah, your tinted window example, I could totally see myself winning that argument too.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, you're also a
and
car guy too, right?
I
We
would, and
talked
I'd be
about
like,
cars before
Like,
now,
I
right?
know this
protection
is
is in
great.
the glass.
Yeah.
Do you want me to Google this?
Exactly.
Although
Well,
last
yeah.
time I Googled
Yeah.
something,
How many relationships do you think that Google has actually broken up since becoming a thing?
Let me tell you the fact.
in Alberta, we call the sticker on the back of your car a decal.
Mm.
And I was like, hey, we got to get a decal for the car. And she's like, what is a decal? And I was like, the sticker on the back. And she's like, you mean a decal? And I was like, you Americans butcher English so bad. And I was like, she's like, no, that's actually how it's pronounced. And I was like, nah. So I Google it and it's like, decal. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. UK version, decal. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm so wrong. I was so wrong.
Come up with this.
Which I accepted, but I just see the value in being able to be reminded all the time that it's not about the content almost all the time. You know, some of the times it is, but
Sure.
Yeah.
it's usually not about the content. It's usually that I'm busy, or like that people are busy, or that we're just not being mindful. I think sometimes our partner doesn't get the best version of us, which is kind of ironic, you know? Like we might use all our emotional resilience at work, and then we come home and we don't. I mean, that's a really hard thing to even say, because I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Like when we actually check in, do they get the best version of me? Because they're certainly the one most worthy of the best version.
Sure.
That's not the truth.
But we forget, you know, the people that we're closest to usually are the people that we are the rudest to, the most impatient with, don't treat the best. And maybe because it's comfortable, you know.
Maybe a false sense of safety, a false sense of security. I mean, you know, we're sitting here talking about the idea of feeling safe, and that's relevant and valuable, obviously, in relationship. And if we really are sovereign beings, like I don't have to be treated that way. Like I have every right, married, not married. I don't care what, you know, legal binding document you've got. It doesn't guarantee you that somebody is beholden to the way that you treat them. Right. So, and I think this goes back, you said a little bit of this, you know, Mark, it's like, we look at I mean, this is the codependency thing. It's like this idea that relationships are very transactional. Like I own you and you owe me this. Like because I love you, you have to act this way, or you need to fill this need for me. And it's like, no, that is not how relationships work at all. And if we stopped looking at them in through a transactional lens, I mean, a lot of relationships would crumble, I think, first of all. But also the ones that do stay, how much deeper and more potent they could actually become, honestly.
Did you guys notice a because you said that in your language, so I'm curious. Did you guys notice a transition? Because in your language, you said, I went from like thinking so much about, is this the right choice in 14 years versus this is the right choice now, and that's what matters. Like, can I create a future with this person? Yeah, I think so. But I'm going to keep checking in with myself. And I know with Kai and I, one of the biggest transitions in our relationship 1.0 to 2.0 was that there really is this experience of honoring each other's choice to be there. Like, I think to myself often, she has, you know, far more choices than I do. You know, out of everyone she could choose, she chooses me. And that is such an honor, like to think about. If I really sit with that, that's like, wow, thank you. And what would I do with that, knowing the value of that? You know, I think we sometimes, because we think getting married or accepting a relationship request on, do people even use Facebook anymore? But you know, that we somehow have them.
Yeah, it's the finish line.
You know, did you guys notice a shift for you from transactional, or was that not really there anyways?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think transactional just shows up rather than it being kind of a larger topic. I can still see it showing up in like my codependent tendencies.
Yeah, me too.
I think slipping into that by nature, codependency leads us down that transactional path, right? So I can definitely still sense it creeping in. You know, you owe this to me, I owe this to you. You know, and we've been in a recent iteration of our relationship really in this conversation around needs, like romantic needs, sexual needs, intimacy needs. And I think, I mean, I would say poor John has definitely met me in a time in my life where I'm like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. Smash the patriarchy, no more fucking performative sex, all these things that women deal with.
It's funny because I was telling her, wait a minute, before me, you were doing all these things. I mean, for the wrong reasons, of
For the
course.
wrong
But
reasons.
man, your ex got all the sex they wanted. They got all the times that you didn't want to do. You just did it for them. And I'm the guy that got, nope, here's the hard line.
Yep.
You need to go.
Yep. It's like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And I'm going to honor myself. And that's where a lot of that codependency work is coming into play. Also, I have a daughter now, which has really amped up, especially as a woman, what that means to be, I don't know, be like, treat myself with the kind of reverence that I would want my daughter to treat herself with. Right.
Mark, I'm lonely.
Joke out of that. It's serious, but
yeah. But I mean, that being said, that we do compromise. I mean, yeah, if you don't want to do something, of course you shouldn't. But I think there's a lot of times you do give, even if you are tired or don't.
Right, and that could be like the whole doing relationship with versus around or at.
Well, that's just part of being in a relationship.
Right.
It's not like
stretching each other.
Right.
Yeah, because if you're like if you're completely okay, wait, let me check in with myself. No, I don't want pizza. Or let me no. If you do I think too much of that, then we really have kind of people in silos.
Rigidity.
Yeah. So I also fear the pendulum swinging the other way too much.
Yeah, you can end up with too much rigidity. I definitely, or too much openness, right? It's like codependency again, always sneaking in.
Always sneaking in.
I mean, I definitely met Kai in the same revolution, I would say.
Revolution feels like a good word.
Yeah, and I remember just one sitting there and her like going off about something to do with the patriarchy. And I was listening and I just sat there and I was like, wow, like this rage is so valid. I believe it was kind of just post the real height of Me Too, the Me Too movement, which I think all of us who were empathetic to the experience, like feeling it, were really experiencing a lot of anger and rage and all that, and I just remember sitting there witnessing her rage, and I was just like, wow, wow, which is what changes worlds, ultimately. And it's also interesting to check my own personal, what was like not even realized male entitlement, about maybe sex or maybe about expectations or not to say that I was in the wrong or whatever, maybe sometimes, but to just have the awareness around it, just to be like, wow, that there's a lot of things that I wasn't paying attention to that are in a woman's experience that now I'm very aware of. So I recognize that that rage has simmered a little.
Yeah.
But maybe because there's space in the relationship for it, and within the men that we know and within the women that we know.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's anger and rage transmuted, right, is one of the most powerful, like you said, agents for change. But when it's not given a platform or given a space to be able to be expressed healthily, it turns into a lot of toxic, just toxic everything, toxic behaviors, toxic emotions, toxic everything. So, I mean, anger, I think, especially for women, is a tricky emotion, right? We're taught that we're not allowed to feel it. Women don't feel anger. It's not feminine to be angry. And so in and of itself, we've got an interesting relationship with anger to kind of work through. And I think finding somebody that actually allows you to dance with that relationship and actually like touch in, touch out, touch in, experience it, turn it over in your hands, that is so powerful for a woman. I mean, I should only speak for myself, but I know a lot of women who would say the same. So I would say I commend you, and I commend you, John, because that's also hard. I mean, there has to be something to be said for it being hard to hold that. You've got generations and generations and generations of rage coming through probably one woman in that moment, right? It's a lot to hold.
Well, to depersonalize it, but also be accountable or audit yourself for where it can be personalized. It's an interesting bridge to hold, but necessary. And if I think in relationship, whether you're male or female or anything in between, access to rage is like clean anger, just clean anger, which isn't destructive. Clean anger is actually very constructive. It draws lines. It says, I love you, which is really a fascinating thing because most people's experience of anger is not, it's aggression.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not helpful at all. And that's most people's experience.
Totally. That's why so many of us are afraid of it.
One of the things I've been able to witness with her is motherhood. And so, which is a whole nother topic. And watching her, whether it's sleep deprived or, just another human, pulling on her and draining her energy. I'm able to see that and definitely be more empathetic of accepting where she's at and
that's
not putting expectations and all that.
Ooh, talk about mirrors, man. That's a whole new level. Especially as somebody who skews more avoidant. I'm like, everybody stop touching me, stop talking to me, stop asking me for things, leave me alone.
There are so many needs here.
So many needs. Like, I just want to crawl into a hole.
She's being hugged by an octopus now. Many hands.
Oh.
Yeah.
I bet. I was talking to Stefanos.
Yeah.
You know Stefanos?
Stefanos, yeah.
And he was saying that being a father has been like the most transcendent, most personal growth. He's like, you think you've done personal growth? Like, wow.
It's true. Also, his little one is little. Wait until she's a toddler, because I know he just had his baby. So I'm like, oh, honey, sit down. You haven't even gotten there yet. Wait until they look you in the face and say something to you that you've said in the past. And you're like, ooh, I don't like the way that sounds when it's coming back at me. She does that shit.
That's
all
amazing.
the time. Oh, God. In the car, she'll go, come on, lady. And I'm like, who are you talking to? She's like, the lady in the car. And I'm like, oh God, she hears me like yell at people in the car too.
Come on, lady. Oh, that's so good.
Yep. Check, Vanessa, check. Okay, pay attention.
For those listening, first off, actually, before we even get in that, thanks so much. I mean, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I've had a lot of great laughs, a lot of great insights, and I'm sure everyone listening has too. And I just appreciate you both so much. You're both friends. You're both incredible teachers. And, for everyone who's listening, where can they find the book? Mm-hmm. Where can they find more of both of you? Obviously, I said you're TikTok stars, so make sure we'll put all the links out in the bottom to make sure we get everyone.
I mean, I would say same back to you too. Much respect and much love.
And I also want to say we met online, and I know we met in person once or twice. I feel a strange kinship towards you. And I think part of it is because you and I have been creating a dialogue about love, also as men. And it's very, not so much now, but 10 years ago, I felt very alone on this, And so meeting someone else who's doing the same, following you and your story that kind of parallels, even though we don't hang out, kind of watching you and you do your thing, always made me feel a little less alone. So thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for this. And thank you for having us on your podcast. The book, just our socials, you can just click our bio link. So I'm at The Angry Therapist across the board. And
I mean, I wish I had it across the board, but my name is not as untakenable as yours. On Instagram, I'm Vanessa S. Bennett. TikTok, I'm the Coda Yoda for right now. But our book is called It's Not Me,
That's
It's You.
That's a great name.
I think it's fine.
That was somebody actually, one of my group classes named me that. And I was like, oh, I like that. I'm going to trademark that.
That's a great name. The Yoda of Coda.
Yeah.
That's great.
He's not wrong.
It's Not Me, It's You.
Yep.
Find it at every retailer, online, all the places. Mm-hmm. Audiobook.
Yep. Which we recorded ourselves doing our interest. So we've got people that have listened to it and said, oh, this is fascinating, because rarely do you have two authors like that doing the back and forth. So apparently it's an interesting experience. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone go check them out. Go pick up the book, and much love. Appreciate you both.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, one of the best ways to support the show is to go subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any more. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it, or share the episode with your community on Instagram or whatever social place you like to hang out. This helps get it into more people's ears, and I'm so grateful for your support, always. Thanks again for tuning in. Much love.